The investigation into the Gilgo beach murders began unexpectedly and gradually, rooted in the mysterious disappearances of several women throughout the 2000s, women who, over time, were linked to this isolated stretch of coastline on Long Island, New York, a region known for its deserted beaches, towering dunes, and stretches of dense forest that extend for miles, offering a veil of natural privacy that, unfortunately, has become an attraction for heinous and difficult-to-detect criminal acts. This area, part of the Ocean Parkway, is a remote corridor connecting coastal communities like Oak Beach and Gilgo Beach, places where traffic is scarce, especially at night, and where the sound of the Atlantic waves can drown out cries for help, making it a perfect setting for a predator to operate without witnesses. The case gained momentum in May 2010 when Shannon Gilbert, a 23-year-old woman involved in escort services, disappeared after a meeting with a client in Oak Beach, a gated and exclusive community that adds layers of mystery to her disappearance, as she was seen running through dark streets, banging on doors and begging for help, before vanishing into the darkness of the surrounding vegetation. Their initial search, conducted by the Suffolk County Police, led to the accidental discovery of other bodies as sniffer dogs and rescue teams combed the swamps and dunes, transforming a missing person investigation into one of the most notorious serial killer cases of the modern era in the United States, with ramifications spanning more than a decade and continuing to evolve to this day. In November 2025, the victims identified in this dark and tragic context included a group of women with similar profiles, many of them young mothers or individuals struggling with economic adversity, who engaged in sex work to survive in a society that often marginalized them, exposing them to inherent dangers such as violent clients and lack of legal protection. Among them was Melissa Barthelemy, a 24-year-old hairdresser originally from Buffalo, New York, who moved to the big city in search of dreams and opportunities, but ended up resorting to Craigslist ads for paid encounters, disappearing in July 2009 after a night in Manhattan. Her body was later found wrapped in burlap along Ocean Parkway, with signs of strangulation indicating a violent and premeditated death. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 25, a single mother of 2 from Norwich, Connecticut, disappeared in July 2007 while working in New York, leaving behind a devastated family who spent years clamoring for answers. Her body was discovered in an advanced state of decomposition that complicated the initial forensic analysis, but which later revealed patterns consistent with the other victims. Megan Waterman, just 22 years old, a devoted mother of a young girl in Scarborough, Maine, disappeared in June 2010 after traveling to Long Island for an online arranged meeting. Her absence was noticed when she didn't return home, and her body was found months later in a remote area, highlighting the vulnerability of women who travel alone for such appointments. Amber Lynn Costello, 27, a North Babylon resident with a history of struggling with drug addiction, was lured to her last meeting in September 2010 with a generous offer of payment, disappearing after being seen getting into a vehicle. Her body was found near the others, reinforcing the theory of a killer who used money as bait to lure victims into deadly traps. In addition to these, other victims such as Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, and an unidentified woman known as Peaches due to a tattoo, were found dismembered in adjacent areas, suggesting variations in modus operandi that could indicate multiple perpetrators or evolution in the killer's method over time. Each of these women had a unique and poignant story. Melissa, for example, was described by friends as vibrant and ambitious, dreaming of opening her own beauty salon, while Maureen was known for her unconditional love for her children, working tirelessly to provide for them, and Megan left loving messages for her daughter before each trip, illustrating the human side behind the cold statistics of homicide. Their disappearances were not isolated. They occurred during a period when online platforms like Craigslist facilitated anonymous encounters, but also exposed users to risks without adequate safeguards, a factor that authorities later identified as a common link among the victims. The discovery of the bodies was an arduous and progressive process, beginning in December 2010, when, during the search for Shannon Gilbert, police officers stumbled upon the remains of Melissa Barthelemy along the Ocean Parkway, a narrow road flanked by tall bushes and quicksand that made movement difficult even for all-terrain vehicles. In the following days, more bodies emerged. Maureen, Megan, and Amber, all laid out in a straight line stretching for approximately several kilometers, partially buried or covered by foliage. in varying stages of decomposition ranging from months to years, requiring the involvement of forensic anthropologists to date the deaths and reconstruct the crime scenes. The dense vegetation, composed of maritime pines and tall grasses, preserved the bodies from animal predators but also accelerated decomposition due to the saline humidity of the ocean air, complicating the collection of evidence such as fingerprints or bodily fluids. In 2011, expanded searches revealed more remains, including dismembered parts of additional victims scattered throughout Manorville and other areas of Long Island, leading to speculation about whether the killer used vehicles to transport and dispose of bodies in multiple locations to confuse authorities. These findings were not limited to the initial 4 victims, known as the Gilgo 4. In total, at least 10 bodies and sets of remains were located between 2010 and 2011, including a man and a young child, which broadened the scope of the investigation beyond a killer focused exclusively on adult women. Although most of the victims shared the profile of sex workers, the serial killer theory quickly gained traction as patterns emerged. The victims were predominantly young women, lured via online advertisements, murdered by asphyxiation or strangulation, and disposed of in isolated locations where the likelihood of quick discovery was low. A modus operandi that echoed classic cases like Ted Bundy or the Green River Killer, but adapted to the digital age with the use of burner phones and fake profiles to avoid tracking. Investigators noted consistencies such as the use of burlap to wrap the bodies, a material common in construction or gardening, suggesting the perpetrator may have had a job related to those fields, and the removal of identifying items like jewelry or clothing to delay identification, tactics that indicated meticulous planning and possible forensic knowledge acquired through reading or professional experience. This hypothesis was supported by psychological profiles developed by the FBI, which painted the killer as a middle-aged white man, a local resident with a family, capable of leading a double life without raising suspicion, someone who frequently traveled along the Ocean Parkway, and knew secondary routes for nighttime disposals. The investigation evolved over the years, beginning with ground and aerial searches using helicopters and drones to map the area, moving on to DNA analysis that was initially limited by the technology of the time, but advanced with the advent of genetic genealogy, a tool that allowed for the comparison of crime scene samples with public databases such as GEDmatch. Initial suspects included local figures such as Joseph Brewer, Shannon Gilbert's client, who was extensively questioned but released for lack of evidence, and James Burke, the former Suffolk County Police Chief, whose 2016 corruption conviction raised questions about deliberate obstruction of the initial investigation, including allegations that he prevented FBI involvement to protect personal interests. Other names emerged, such as John Bitrolf, a carpenter convicted of 2 similar murders in 2014, whose crimes in Manorville shared geographical and methodological similarities, although DNA testing ruled him out of the Gilgo deaths. In 2020, a reinvigorated task force announced the reopening of the case, incorporating artificial intelligence to analyze cell phone traffic patterns and surveillance cameras along the parkway, as well as 3D facial reconstructions of unidentified victims to appeal to the public for tips, although they maintained secrecy about key evidence to avoid contaminating potential witnesses. Shannon Gilbert remained a pivotal piece in this puzzle, her case serving as the catalyst that exposed the horrors buried in Gilgo. Originally from Ellenville, New York, Shannon struggled with bipolar disorder and used her work as an escort to fund her education and artistic aspirations, including acting and dancing. On the night of May 1, 2010, after arriving at Brewer's house, she made a frantic 23-minute 911 call, screaming, "They're trying to kill me," as she ran through the streets of Oak Beach, banging on neighbors' doors. As her mother, Mari Gilbert, would later recount in emotional interviews, the recording of this call, partially released in 2011, captured male background voices and Shannon's growing panic, leading to theories that she was pursued by multiple individuals or the victim of a drug-induced psychotic episode, although her family vehemently contested the official conclusion of accidental drowning in a nearby swamp, arguing that neck injuries and a broken hyoid bone pointed to strangulation, similar to the other victims. Investigators revisited the recording numerous times, using audio enhancement software to isolate noises such as footsteps or vehicles, and in 2022, an independent analysis commissioned by the family suggested the presence of a third voice, possibly that of an assailant, Although this remained inconclusive, the victim's connection to sex work added sociological depth to the case, exposing the vulnerabilities inherent in a stigmatized and criminalized profession where women like these operated without safety nets, often meeting clients in cheap hotels or remote residences without backup, making them easy prey for predators. This sparked national debates about decriminalization, with activists arguing that more progressive laws, such as those adopted in parts of Europe, could allow for client background checks and police reports without fear of arrest, potentially preventing tragedies like these. Personal stories illustrated this. Melissa received taunting calls from the killer using her own phone, calling her younger sister Amy, and describing gruesome details about the body. Calls traced to busy areas like Times Square to mask the location, demonstrating the perpetrator's psychological cruelty. Megan, in turn, kept an online diary where she expressed fears about her safety, entries that were used by the police to trace her last movements. Theories about suspects abounded, from medical professionals with access to paralyzing drugs to local fishermen familiar with ocean currents for aquatic disposal. But the lack of concrete evidence, such as surveillance videos or eyewitnesses, kept the case in limbo for years, with the police conducting thousands of interviews and testing hundreds of DNA samples without initial matches. The media played an instrumental role in keeping the case in the spotlight, with documentaries like 2016's The Killing Season, exploring potential connections to other clusters of prostitute murders along the East Coast, suggesting a death row from New York to Atlantic City, and books like Robert Kolker's 2013 Lost Girls, which humanized the victims by outlining their lives beyond the stigma, focusing on their families and daily struggles. Inspiring film adaptations on Netflix in 2020 that reached millions of viewers and generated waves of anonymous tips. Articles in publications like the New York Times and Newsday pressed for accountability, exposing flaws in the initial investigation, such as delays in processing evidence and biases against marginalized victims, leading to departmental reforms in Suffolk County, including sensitivity training for cases involving sex workers. Recent developments beginning in 2023 brought a dramatic breakthrough with the arrest of Rex Heuermann, a 59-year-old architect from Massapequa Park, Long Island, a married man with children who led a seemingly normal suburban life, working in Manhattan as an architectural consultant for construction projects, but who was linked to the crimes through a groundbreaking combination of evidence: DNA from a pizza crust discarded in a public trash can that matched strands of hair found on the victims' bodies, cell phone records that placed him in the vicinity of the disappearances, and searches of his home revealing an arsenal of over 200 firearms, pornographic magazines with violent themes, and computers with a history of searches on torture methods, famous serial killers, and forensic techniques to avoid detection. Initially charged with 3 murders, those of Melissa, Megan, and Amber, in July 2023, the charges expanded to include Maureen in January 2024, and subsequently Jessica, Taylor, Valerie Mack, and Sandra Costilla, totaling 7 counts of first and second-degree murder, with prosecutors alleging that Heuermann used his construction knowledge to dismember bodies and his access to vehicles to transport them. In November 2025, recent updates indicate that Heuermann was exonerated in the death of an 8th victim from 1994, a Long Island sex worker, after DNA tests ruled out his connection, a surprising twist that suggests the possibility of multiple killers in the area or initial errors in connecting cases, although he remains charged with the 7 main deaths. His trial, scheduled for 2026 after postponements, has seen key judicial decisions. In September 2025, Judge Timothy Mazzei denied the defense's request to split the proceedings into multiple trials, opting for a single mega-trial for efficiency, and allowed the use of new DNA evidence collected through a forced buccal swab, despite arguments of rights violations. Heuermann, who pleads not guilty, has appeared at recent hearings looking dejected, and prosecutors have promised major developments, possibly including more charges based on digital evidence recovered from encrypted devices. The task force, now including cybersecurity experts, continues to investigate connections to unsolved bodies using isotopes to trace the geographic origins of victims and AI to analyze Heuermann's travel patterns, which coincide with dates of disappearances. Families of the victims, led by figures like Mari Gilbert, who tragically passed away in 2016 but whose legacy continues through her daughter Sheree, organize annual vigils at Gilgo Beach, erecting memorials with crosses and photos to honor the lost and press for justice, while organizations like the Gilbert Family Foundation offer support to families of the missing, funding private searches and legal advocacy. The case also inspired legislative changes, such as the proposed Shannon Law in New York to improve emergency call responses in remote areas and debates about regulating online platforms to protect vulnerable users. As the legal process progresses, with key witnesses such as Hoyerman's former colleagues recounting strange behaviors like an obsession with privacy and nighttime travel, and forensic experts presenting digital reconstructions of crime scenes, the Gilgo Beach enigma transitions from an unsolved mystery to a case study in investigative tenacity, offering gradual closure to the families and valuable lessons about digital surveillance, social empathy, and the persistence in the pursuit of truth in the face of human evil. Expanding on the individual victims, let's take Jessica Taylor, whose dismembered remains were found in 2003 in Manorville and 2011 in Gilgo, a 20-year-old from Poughkeepsie with distinctive tattoos that aided in her identification years later, her death involving decapitation and removal of hands to prevent fingerprints, a tactic that suggests increasing sophistication in the killer. Valerie Mack, identified in 2020 through genetic genealogy, was a 24-year-old woman from Philadelphia who disappeared in 2000, her similar remains indicating a long-term pattern. Sandra Costilla, a victim from 1993, was added to the indictment in 2024, linking Hoyerman to older crimes and suggesting his criminal activity may date back decades. These details, revealed through meticulous forensic analysis, including comparison of burlap fibers with construction materials associated with Hoyerman, paint a picture of a serial predator who evolved over time, adapting to technological advancements while exploiting social vulnerabilities. Long Island's geography, with its natural barriers and isolated communities, facilitated these acts but also preserved crucial evidence, such as rare pollen on the bodies that linked to specific scenes. Comparisons to other cases, such as that of Joel Rifkin, another Long Island serial killer in the 1990s, highlight regional patterns of violence against marginalized women, prompting academic studies on environmental and sociological factors that foster such crimes. Media attention has remained intense, with podcasts like The Long Island Serial Killer, updating episodes monthly with judicial news, and TV series dramatizing the case to educate the public about warning signs in online dating. In 2025, with the trial approaching, speculation about plea deals or new confessions abounds, but families remain vigilant, ensuring that the victims' voices are not silenced. This case, more than a crime thriller, serves as a mirror for systemic failures, urging reforms that protect the vulnerable and expedite justice, ensuring that tragedies like Gilgo never happen again. To delve deeper, let's consider the psychological impact on local communities. Residents of Massapequa Park, where Hoyerman lived, reported growing paranoia, with neighbors questioning everyday behaviors and installing more security cameras, while tourists avoid Gilgo Beach, transforming it into a haunted place rather than a recreational destination. Investigators, many of whom have dedicated careers to the case, speak of sleepless nights reviewing files, and forensic psychologists analyze Hoyerman's profile as that of a narcissist with sadistic traits, possibly motivated by control and domination. With advances in technology, such as AI-equipped drones for wide-area searches, future resolutions seem promising. But Gilgo's legacy remains a grim warning about the darkness that can lurk in ordinary lives.